Namaskar friends, this is NJ, your host on this channel. In this video friends, we are going to have our discussion on the concept of the Marana Karaka Sthana of the planet. So all the English speakers must have got confused which term did I use just now. So friends, it can be translated as the death-like state for a planet, because many times I have used this term while explaining any transit video, any transit results. Also recently when I uploaded this video on the concept of the ascendant's degrees. So lot many of you have been asking me about the importance of the Marana Karaka Sthana as well. So I just thought that why should not we have a standalone discussion on this topic only. So now friends, try to understand this thing. Whenever we have to assess the planetary dignity, planetary results, it all comes down to the planets' affinity to specific houses as well. We get the results in astrology on this core principle that planets represent what? Zodiac sign represents how, and the houses represents where. So that's very simple. Planets are the embodiment of the divine celestial astral energies. Zodiac sign just provides them a theme, a style via which planets function their results. And ultimately, eventually, finally, it's the houses only where we actually experience the results, where planets manifest the results. So friends, you must be knowing about the fact the zodiac sign which planet rules, or where they feel debilitated, where they feel exalted. But over and above that, there are specific houses as well where planets are little bit kind of inimical as well. So in this video, we are just gonna talk about the Marana Karaka Sthana, again the complicated term. So the death-like state of the planet, and in some other video, I will talk about the favorable placement for the planets as well in terms of the houses. But in this video, we are only going to be talking about the death-like state of the planets and what could be the rational explanation behind that. So friends, to begin with, definitely with the king amongst all the planets, which is the planet Sun. So for Sun, the placement in the 12th house is considered as the Marana Karaka Sthana of the planet Sun. Now, irrespective of whether Sun is placed in an enemy sign or a friend sign or in its own sign, but if you will find Sun to be placed in the 12th house, there will be certain level of difficulty which Sun is going to experience in order to manifest its results in its full glory. Now you have to understand this thing friends, that whenever we talk about the true essence of the planet, so Sun in its true essence just represents regality, popularity. Sun just wants to be in the limelight. And when we talk about the certain dark houses in our astrological chart, so you could call that as 4th house as well. But when we talk about the signification of the 12th house, there is a lot of hidden aspect which is involved over there. And friends, whenever we talk about the aspect of the 12th house, it has everything to do with the let go. And all the clandestine and the secretive activities takes place in the 12th house. So because of which Sun finds it at unease if it's going to be placed in the 12th house, and that is the only reason our ancient sages have allotted this house as the placement of the Marana Karaka Sthana for the planet Sun to be placed in. Now friends, moving ahead, now comes the second planet, which is the planet Moon. So for the Moon, its placement in the 8th house is considered as its Marana Karaka Sthana. So friends, try to understand this thing. Here we are not only talking about the perspective of the signs where planets gets debilitated and the corresponding houses, you have to relate it in that way. It's not like that. Definitely in the case of the Moon, the same corresponding equation is falling in, because Moon feels itself debilitated in the Scorpio sign, and somehow 8th house energy also represent the same signification. But the point over here is that friends, we talk about the 8th house energy, there is a lot of stress over here, there is a lot of obsession over here. Like in a real sense, whenever we talk about the psychological turmoil, deep unspoken emotions, all the psychological chaos and crisis, somehow out of all the 12 houses, 8th house represents all these qualities. That is the only reason friends, you might find a lot of people with a refined 8th house. They might be very good in terms of their take on spirituality, their intuition might be working on a very higher plane. But when we talk about the psychological or mental vulnerability, you will find it functioning over there. Like the way we say this thing, that all the naturally gifted psychic, they also have a highly strung nature as well, because the problem is that they might be very much attuned with the other dimensions, but in order to function here in the real world as well, that sometimes becomes kind of little bit difficult or chaotic for them. So that is the only reason, friends, if you're going to place a sensitive, a fragile, a impressionable, a sensitive planet like moon, which wheresoever house it's going to be placed in, it's going to get attached towards the signification of that house, all your emotions, all of your feelings, and all of your perception. Because whatsoever happens in our life, we experience life through our moon. So moon plays a very pivotal role, and if you're going to place it in the 8th house, it remains very much vulnerable or susceptible towards negativity, obsession, and psychological chaos, because of which no matter whether your moon is exalted over here, it's placed in the friendly sign, Jupiter is conjunct over here, but if you will find moon to be placed over here, it is not considered as a good placement for it, or it is considered as the death-like state, Marana Karaka Avastha, for moon to be placed in. Now friends, moving ahead, now when we talk about from the perspective of the planet Mars, so definitely friends, for Mars's perspective, Mars is not considered as good in the 7th house. So the Marana Karaka Avastha, or the death-like state for the planet Mars, is the 7th house. The only reason is that because 7th house is the house of our relationship, all sort of intimacy, all sort of deep committed relationship we generally form in the society, in the world, from the 7th house. And Mars is a planet of strife, Mars is a planet of aggression, and if you're gonna place the planet of aggression in the 7th house, this can create disharmony in so many levels, whether this could be in the form of forming a lasting relationship in business, or whether in the form of forming a harmonious relationship within your matrimonial tie. And just because, friends, Mars is also a significator of passion, of animalistic instincts. Try to understand this thing, that when we talk about the sensual, enjoyable side of the sexuality as well, that is something which Venus represents. Mars just represents conquering it, controlling it. So even from the perspective of the sexual intimacy, the placement of Mars in the 7th house is not considered as very harmonious. Now again, irrespective of whether Mars is exalted here, placed in a friendly sign, in its own sign, but the placement of Mars in the 7th house is considered as the Marana Karaka Avastha for it to be placed in. Moving ahead, friends, now when we talk about from Mercury's perspective, so definitely the houses like 4th house and 7th house are considered as the Marana Karaka Avastha for the planet Mercury to be placed in. Because friends, Mercury is the planet of commerce, trade, communication. So try to understand this thing, that in the 4th house it could create vulnerability. Now this could be because of the anxiety, because in the 4th house there are a lot of emotions and feelings which are involved over there, and Mercury is the planet of rationality. You cannot succeed in the business world if you have so much overpouring emotions. So that could be one reason for that. And when we talk about Mercury's Marana Karaka Avastha in the 7th house, because now you must be wondering that 7th house also represents commerce and trade, and Mercury is the chief significator of commerce and trade. So why 7th house is the Marana Karaka Avastha for the planet Mercury? So friends, the answer is that Mercury is also considered as a important or a unique planet, and whenever we talk about the sexual intercourses and forming that physical bond, intimacy, that we generally see from the 7th house. So because of which Mercury's important or unique planet's placement in the 7th house is not considered as very harmonious. Moving ahead, friends, now from Jupiter's perspective you have to understand, so now that's very obvious, Jupiter is the planet of wisdom, of transcendental knowledge, of compassion, righteousness, ethics, charity, religious belief, gratitude, goodness. So now friends, if you're going to place the planet Jupiter in the 3rd house, it's not considered as a very harmonious placement for it. Now again, Jupiter in itself represents all sort of opportunities, abundance, prosperity. So in the 3rd house, it might give you material opportunities. But the true essence of Jupiter is to elevate you or encourage you towards the path of devotion, righteousness for your soul elevation. That is the only reason in the 9th house, like which has the affinity with the Sagittarius, Jupiter is considered as very good over there. This is the house of God, the devotion, and 12th house is the ultimate house of liberation, moksha. Jupiter also has got affinity over there. And when we talk about 10th house, which has affinity with Capricorn, where Jupiter is considered as debilitated, because this is the house where in order to fulfill your actions and duties, you might have to compromise on your principles, on your ethics. And same is the case with the 3rd house, where Jupiter is considered as Marana Karaka, because in the 3rd house there is a lot of self-willedness. Like when we talk about out of all the 12 houses, which house could be considered as the house of aggression, which house could be considered as the house where it could be self-willed interest a lot over there? So that is the 3rd house. And like the way the innate nature of Jupiter is for compassion, for charity, for letting go, which is the 9th house and the 12th house, and the signification of the 3rd house is in complete contradiction with the Jupiterian qualities. So because of which, if you are going to give a weapon or a gun to a spiritually driven person, so that is the kind of contradicting energy which you are going to find, and that is the only reason Jupiter is considered as to be placed in a death-like state if placed in the 3rd house. Moving ahead, friends, now if you want to understand from the perspective of Venus, so definitely friends, Venus is the planet of beautiful things, of enjoyment, of happiness, sensuality. Now friends, for Venus's perspective, its placement in the 6th house is considered as is Marana Karaka Sthana, or the death inflicting or equivalent state. Because a planet of enjoyment and pleasure and luxury, sensuality, if you are going to place it in a house where there is a lot of struggle, daily hardship, routines, so much of strife and so much of the enmity, so because of which Venus's placement in the 6th house is not considered as its dignified house placement. Irrespective of whether Venus is exalted over here, it's placed in its friendly sign, some of the signification of Venus might have to compromise if they are placed in the 6th house. Or you could say in this way that the best and the true nectar or the essence of the life of experiencing pleasure and happiness might take a toll if Venus is going to be placed in the 6th house. Moving ahead, friends. Now, if you want to understand it from the perspective of the planet Saturn, so friends, that's very obvious. Saturn represents karma, it represents hard work, it represents discipline, tests and trials and responsibility, seriousness. All of those things are represented by the planet Saturn. The beautiful aspect of the Saturn is that Saturn is the planet which is always concerned for the masses. Saturn just wants you to put you on the path of greatness, and greatness can only be achieved if you believe in the dictum of the wisdom of serving and sharing it with the world. And all these qualities are in complete contradiction with the 1st house, because whenever we talk about the 1st house, there is a lot of association towards self gain, self projection. So these all are the qualities which are in complete contradiction with the Saturnian nature. So friends, that is the only reason. Trust me, in my own consulting experience, you would say, or like there is a very good friend of mine, even in her chart, she is a Libra ascendant person. Now you will say that for Libra ascendant people, like definitely Saturn becomes the Yoga Karaka, the most important planet, and Saturn is placed in her 1st house exalted. But still, she might be good in her commerce, in her business, in all other aspect of the life, but her matrimonial life, actually, she faced a very heavy karma over there in that aspect. So whenever we talk about the Saturn being placed in the 1st house, in some way it could bring some sort of karma, some sort of lackness in the life. Now again, it all comes down to in which dignity, in which sign Saturn is going to placed in, and most importantly, you have to learn the essence of the planet with these kind of Marana Karaka Sthana placements, which is about the essence of the Saturn is sharing, letting go, and being concerned for the others. So the attitude of service and sharing and giving away, if you opted all of these qualities and the humility, then you can actually amend or make amendments with this placement of Saturn in the 1st house. But just because friends, Saturn is placed in a specific house in your chart because of some karmic reason, some lessons which it needs to be it wants to teach you, so you have to make peace with it. But yes friends, from the knowledge perspective, Saturn's placement in the first house is considered as its Marana Karaka Avastha. And friends, if you want to understand it from the perspective of Rahu and Ketu, so Rahu, definitely for Rahu, its placement in the 9th house is considered as its Marana Karaka Avastha. Now friends, try to understand this thing, that out of all the 12 houses in our chart, the only house which prepares us for our next life, which keeps us firm in this life, which inspires us for becoming something bigger, greater, being on the right path, all of that comes from the 9th house. Our devotion, our hopefulness, our loyalty, good ethics, virtues, values. So this is the house which should not come in the influence of Rahu. So again friends, try to understand this thing. It's just like that the placement of Rahu in the 9th house could give you, success in the foreign land. There is so many different ways if Rahu is going to be dignified in terms of the sign placement. If it's going to be placed over here, can manifest good results, but again, some aspect of the life might have to take a toll, which is about Rahu in itself represents illusion, deception. So in those areas where the life and other beautiful aspect of your chart, which might be trying to teach you, put you on the right path, encourage you, awaken you. So the placement of Rahu over here, whether from your life's perspective or from Rahu's perspective as well, because Rahu will also not be in a dignified state or in a comfortable state, because the way Rahu wants to make you street smart, and the house, the energies and the qualities of the house are completely in contradiction to that. So because of which there is a turmoil, whether from the house's perspective, soul's perspective, or whether from the Rahu's perspective. But Rahu's placement in the 9th house is considered as its Marana Karaka Avastha. And lastly friends, from Ketu's perspective, there is no exact record on that, but many astrologers take Ketu's placement in the 4th house as its Marana Karaka Avastha. That the logic which is generally being used by many astrologers is that Ketu is the significator of the detachment. Ketu is the significator of some sort of past life connection as well. So Ketu's placement in the 4th house could give you a very detached outlook towards your foundation. And many times what happens is that Ketu's placement in the 4th house many times create difficulties in that in some early childhood experiences. Native's life might get overshadowed with his past life deeds or actions or karmas as well. So there is a lot of connotation on that. If you know about something about it, so I will highly appreciate if you will write that in the comment section. But yes friends, that is something which I wanted to say on this concept. And whatsoever we have discussed in this video, all of these Marana Karaka Avastha placements of the planets are going to be equally applicable in different divisional charts as well. And as you must be knowing about this thing, like the way we talk about the significator Karaka connected with the each house, same way even the divisional chart has got a connected Karaka or the significator planet as well. So for example, if in your D9 chart, you have to scrutinize D9 chart, individually you have to give attention to the Venus's placement. Same is the way in the D10 chart or the Dasamsa chart, you have to see the placement of the Saturn, which is the natural Karaka of that divisional chart. So while scrutinizing different divisional charts, you also have to look at the placement of the significator planet, whether Venus in the D9 chart is placed in its Marana Karaka Avastha, which is the 6th house, whether Saturn is placed in the 1st house of the D10 chart, which is its Marana Karaka Avastha. So that is how friends, you have to do the scrutinization. So that is something friends which I wanted to say as a part of my inputs in this standalone video of the Marana Karaka Avastha concept, death-like stage or condition of a planet. For further more updates and notifications on the divine science of Vedic astrology, please subscribe to my YouTube channel and like my Facebook page. धन्यवाद.